episode of this new show, Fix My Mix. It came from the old show, Featured Artist Live, which we were doing. I did a little experiment with some songs which hadn't been released. They were still works in progress. And I decided to go with the format because it's so enjoyable and it's so useful. Thank you so much for being here. If you're here in the live chat currently, don't forget to say hello and let me know who you are and where you are. And one of those people that is there at the moment would, of course, be Mimo Japan. Sorry, not Marlon. One of my guests is speaking with me on private chat and distracting me. Thank you, Marlon. I'm off to a rocky start already. So this format of the show has been something that we've been doing for the last 3 weeks, and I want to thank the people who have sent their mixes in, because it's an incredibly brave thing to do, isn't it? To send your unfinished work to people. But it's a really kind of useful thing to do, actually, because one of my guests is so distracting me. I'm going to have issues with him. But anyway, I'm off to a really rough start today. So it's a really important thing to do, because at the point when you've been mixing something for a while, you tend to lose your judgment. Now, I've heard the mixes for today's show, but my guests have not heard them. And that's really important, actually, because it's often that very fresh, that fresh hearing of a song when you perhaps even haven't heard it before, you haven't heard it for a while, where you get that most sort of honest representation. I suspect that my guests will have a really good idea of what needs to be fixed in these mixes today. I shouldn't go any further without saying thank you to the sponsor of the show. That is DistroKid, just up above here. If you follow that link in the description, that VIP link, you will get a discount at no extra cost to you, and I will get a little bit of a kickback for that, so thank you very much in advance for that. I will bring my guest on very, very soon, and we'll move on with the show, but I'm going to quickly say hello to a few people who are in here. We have Doug here. G'day, Doug. How are you going from Washington State? Always good to see you here. And it's always extremely wonderful to see Jade Starr, who I've just been watching Jade over on Pete John's channel, or not watching Jade, but I've just been over with Jade on Pete John's channel, Studio Live today, where he was interviewing the wonderful Ricky T. Brown. Now, normally when I have Ricky T. Brown on this show, he's accompanied by a YouTuber who goes by the name of Lonely Rocker, and I am going to bring that young YouTuber on the screen now to say hello to you all. G'day, Dan. How you going?
Good morning.
The reason I've had to bring you in really so quickly is because you once in a while you just get those days you're fumbling over your words, they just won't come out, everything just goes to crap, and that's what's been happening at the beginning.
And Marlon's not helping with this behind
Marlon
the scenes
is not helping. He's got the devil in him. He is totally, I've hidden him now. I'm going to find a way to get my revenge on him now or at some point in the future when he's least
make him say all the artist names today.
I think that's a good start. That's a very good start. Yes, that's very. Dan, how have you been? You were on the show last week. I haven't told you this. You were second choice for today's show. That's terrible, isn't it? You're a stand-in. We normally have Ed Thorne on around about this time on the schedule. He couldn't make it because he's very, very lazy at the moment. He doesn't do any work. He doesn't really do anything constructive with his life. He's just been on holiday to the Dominican Republic to see if he can catch a virus for the third time. I don't know. He's on a mission. But
I hear he's all blonde now.
So he couldn't be on the show. So you're playing second fiddle to Ed there. But anyway, so how have you been? What have you been doing? And you told me just before, as you know, when we were doing the pre-chat here, you told me that you're just about to release a video. So tell me what it's all about.
Yeah, well, I can't say exactly what it's all just yet. It's a brand new product. It's a video for 2 Notes audio engineering. So one of the things that I love doing, that I have evolved into in my studio, is direct tube amp recording. So 2 Notes Torpedo Captor X is at the center of that workflow, and they are often releasing new dynamic IR packs. So 2 Notes does what they call dynamic cab IRs, where you can actually move microphones and change. Really, really cool. So
love that stuff.
Last week they released the Hughes and Kettner package, and today they're releasing a very, very cool, back from the depths of a vault, possibly the holy grail of cabinets. And I got an advanced look, and that'll be coming out just under 3 hours from now.
Oh, nice. Okay. I'd be just close to my bedtime, but I'll take a look just before I snooze off. I hope it doesn't help me to snooze off, Dan. I hope.
Well, I am the lonely rocker, so it may be a little loud, but we'll see what happens.
Okay, cool. Let's bring in young Marlon here from White Noise Studio. I don't know why I'm calling him young. I mean, young. But young Marlon. I mean, he's young, but he's not the best looking guy. Let's face it. But there he is. He's here anyway. With his beard and his glum look, and he's reading out all the names today on the show. Marlon,
I will do a better job.
We were talking about you on Pete Johns' channel last week, Pete Johns Studio Live today.
Yeah,
we were talking about you on his Creators Town Hall show. I was on there as a guest, and we had a total love fest for you, Marlon. It was just, isn't Marlon great? Isn't he a great guy? Isn't he? He's knowledgeable, and he's had great success recently on his channel. How's it going for you over there in White Noise Studio? Is it nuts for you? Are you getting phone calls from agents? I mean, supermodels calling you, making advances? What's going on over there? How's it feeling for you?
Yeah, actually, this is the last ever live stream I will do, because this is becoming beneath me. So, but I'm obliged to do this one by contract by you. So, so that's why I'm here.
Okay, I'm glad. I really don't want you to be. I really don't want you to be on top of me. That's the main thing I'm getting out of that.
well, it's good. It's good to know. I had my little spike last 2 weeks, but it's all settling back to my normal sad number of views. So that's very
YouTube's very humbling like that, isn't it? You know,
absolutely.
You do that, you think, oh, everything's going great, and that's because finally everyone's noticed how amazing I am. I'm incredible, and the world's finally noticed, and then everyone, that happened for me and a lot of people during the C word when it first broke, the virus, that is, in 2020. And we all sat back going, oh, this is awesome. Everyone's at home wanting to learn about home recording. And so those of us who kind of had established channels and like that. And then after a couple of months, we went, woo. And we had to get back to the hard work of trying to make good videos again. And that's what it's about. Both you guys make great videos. I love both of your work. It's very different in style, but I really love it. There are links in the description down below, folks. Follow them. Make sure you subscribe to both of these fine gentlemen's channels and watch their videos, because that's the main thing you'll need to do if you want to see more of their videos. That's what's going to come up in your feed. Check out the one that Dan just mentioned there. And quickly from you, Marlon, what's coming up from you very soon?
I will release a video at 5 minutes after 6 tomorrow morning.
Oh.
Because the official plugin will be released at 4 minutes after 6. I learned so, but I can't tell you yet which one it is, because it's on the NDA.
Ah, okay. All right then. Our lips are sealed. We shall say nothing more about it. Okay. So Dan has been on this format of the show before, but Marlon, this is your first time to be on this format of the show. Well, I can tell you guys, if you didn't hear, the idea is to have unfinished work on it. I think this is really useful, because now we can really be critical. We don't have to soften. No, but I guess the point is that these artists are expecting for us to be a little critical and find what could be improved with the tracks, okay, before they go ahead and release it. And I think we may find that we enjoy these songs, of course, and we may praise them, but the most helpful thing I think we're going to be able to do is give them a few tips about what they could do with these mixes before they release. And as I said earlier, I believe that, just a bit of a heads up, these 3 tracks are actually all pretty close to being finished. But as we know, that last 5% can be the hardest part. And as I said earlier, I think that's because you've usually lost perspective by that time. You've been living so close to the music and the track that it's hard to be objective. So we can be objective. We can be the 3 objective amigos and have a listen to these tracks. Now, I'm also not giving too much background info on these tracks. The main reason for that is because I don't have much background info on these tracks, because I haven't been asking people for background info. But that was on purpose, because I just wanted to focus on the music rather than the story behind the music. There's a little bit of story here and there, but not too much. We're going to keep focused on the music. So now the first one that we've got coming up here today, I will tell you up front that I played this to Susie yesterday. I played all 3 songs, and I played this one last, and I said to her, "Oh, you won't like this one." It was like one of those ones I was thinking, it's not her style. She doesn't like this kind of music. And she was like, "Oh, no, this is really, really cool. I really, really like this song." So points already. Now, as we discussed, it's going to be up to Marlon to read out the artist's name. By the way, the artists that I've picked don't know that I've picked them. So if they're watching, if they're in the stream or they're watching on the replay, this will be a surprise to them that I picked these songs. I haven't been letting people know. I thought it'd be more fun just for it to be a bit of a surprise. So, Marlon, it's your job to read out in English, please.
Joe Howard and Danny Thompson, Kato and the King.
Yeah, Kato and the King indeed. So just as it was Joe who sent this to me, Joe Howard, and he was saying this song is called Kato and the King, that me and my friend Danny Thompson just did. I'm a musician that also has a studio, and Cakewalk has been the DAW I've used since the DOS days. That's DOS for Disk Operating System, for the folks who don't know. My primary music is more electric based than the attached track, but I'm primarily a guitarist, so some people associate me with tracks like Kato and the King. It's going to be a relief for Dan to know that this is not electronic music, because he hates electronic music with a passion. He only loves things with guitars in there. And there we go. Let's have a listen to Kato and the King.
Legend has it in the Hollywood Hills back in 1972. Said a black Cadillac with the king in back. He was looking for something to do. So he took a short ride up Mulholland Drive to a house
silence of the audience.
I don't think we've ever had a song on any of these live shows of quite that kind of style there. Before we talk about the mix, I've got to say I found it rather invigorating. Actually, I found that there was a lot of energy in there. I like the energy, but I want to ask my favourite guest on the show this week about this, and of course his name is Dan the Lonely Rocker. Let's ask Dan.
That was like a shot of coffee for this early morning live stream,
right?
From where I live. Yes.
Yeah.
I quite enjoyed that. Where my musical stylings reside. So anything resembling a real band is always a good start for me. So I found myself getting into it pretty quickly, which is good. So I have three very specific. I actually took notes this time. I learned my lesson from the last stream because when we start discussing, then someone would ask me a question I completely forgot. So three things that sort of came up to me, and this is something I find myself experiencing a lot when you get into that last 5% of the mix, is identifying where some of that mud is, just combing through the mix a little bit. I don't know, somewhere around the lower mids, I just found it a little bit muddy. Again, we're all wearing the same headphones today, but these tend to be a little bit boomy.
Let's just show the folks at home that we didn't plan this, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just turn around here, guys. But yeah, we are all. This show is not sponsored by Bad Dynamic whatsoever, but it may as well have been. I should have.
It reminds me of when Metallica, all the guys at Metallica decided to get haircuts at the same time. So,
so you were talking about the mud down there.
Well, this last. The last 5% of the mix I found was a big hump for me. I know Marlon's more of a seasoned studio production guy in mixing, but for me, self-taught, working in home studios, probably rooms are not super optimal. You're kind of get to that point where you start guessing, right? You're like, it sounds good, and then I take it to the car and it doesn't sound so good, and then it sounds great, and then tomorrow it doesn't sound so good. That's usually because there are some conflicts, some mud building up, and you just don't know how to comb it out. So I'm hearing maybe lower mids, it just sounds a little bit thick down there. Maybe to comb through there and see if you can clean it up a little bit. Also, bass guitar and kick drum, that's also always another challenge, where often lower registers are really hard to hear properly in the studio, so you're often fighting, but a little EQing to separate the kick and the bass drum a little bit might help. And one thing you might be surprised to hear from me is I find that the vocals need to be a little bit more present, a little more up front, and they're very dead center. I'd love to hear the vocals maybe exploring the stair, make them a bit wider, and maybe even, finding its way around the spectrum a little bit. It just felt very center, and a little bit, I think we can bump up the vocals a little bit.
Yeah. I don't want to preempt Marlon, but I'll say that was in my notes as well. Marlon, we've now put you on a pedestal. Dan has already said that you're much more experienced than either of us, so we're now listening to your final word.
I agree on the vocal part, actually, with Dan. Didn't he had an electronic background usually?
This is Joe, who's half of this. Was saying that he normally himself produces electronic music, but he's also in this project where he plays guitar, sort of thing.
I can hear that in the mix, that he is more electronic based, because I find that the balance is of the mix is really more like electronic music based, with a lot of low end, a lot of bass, a lot of drums. Right. With a tune like this, which is a bit of a rockabilly song, I would say it's vocal first, guitar second, drums third, and bass is somewhere in between. So it's a different way of building a mix. I would turn down the reverb on the entire track. I think it's a lot of reverb. It muddies up the mix. I like reverb on a guitar, but spring reverb or something like that. One thing I noticed is it is energetic, but I felt that the guitar could benefit if it was actually moved back with 10 or 20 milliseconds. Just make it more laid back. It was really upfront. And to me, it was too up. It was too... was not laid back enough. It should be more laid back, especially the guitar. It's rockabilly, like slow playing. really moody. So that was something which stood out to me. And at first, you can hear that in the first break in the song. It really is really ahead of its really ahead in timing. If it's more back, you get a little bit more of a rest in the music. It sounds more laid back. It sounds more comforting to listen to. It was a bit too aggressive for me for this style of music.
Oh, interesting. Actually. That's really. I like what you said there. It's funny because one of the things I picked up on was that I felt the drums were over compressed in this. It hit me, especially with one of the early drum breaks. I could really hear the compression, and I hadn't thought of the fact maybe if Joe who sent this in, if he does come from that electronic music background, then he's used to pushing drums really hard. Now, of course, in this style of music, which I don't think is quite rockabilly, it's more psychobilly, but we can be corrected on that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but I think that of course the drums are really important. That's what made this music what it is. But they're not. They're important in terms of arrangement, not so much in the mix. They just didn't, because they didn't probably even have the technology to really push them that hard back then. But yeah, so definitely. On the drums, I think we're all in agreement that the vocals need to come up a little bit. So I think if you can get anything out of this, Joe and Danny, that would be it. For me, personally, I felt that I've put here that it could do with a little more air. So it sounded very low and middle to me, and I just wasn't getting much of that nice airiness, you know. And indeed, to some degree, God, it's funny. Sometimes you get too much separation in a mix, yeah, and we're trying to glue things together and make it. This was almost like too glued together, if that makes any sense. Maybe it was a little bit over, but it all sounded very thick and in one place. And I was like, I want to hear each instrument sort of breathe in its own space just a little bit more. That's not very helpful. It doesn't give you any solutions, because you know it's this very sort of broad way of explaining what I'm trying to say. But plus side. Great track, actually. Just a good, fun track, and the writing was good and all that. And I know you don't want any advice probably at this stage on changing anything about the composition, but I'm just putting it out there. Get a couple of female vocals on there, and this becomes the B-52s, and it's freaking awesome. There you go. You may have
showing your age, Mike.
I'm always showing my age. I just get up in the morning and show my age. That happens. But yeah, again, what a great start to the show, though. Just great energy. I love that. And I'll tell you, all of the songs have got really good energy about them today. But I will say that when I used to listen to this sort of music back in the late 80s or so, and I was right into my psychobilly and stuff back then, it was much more difficult to release music. You had to get a record deal in order to, just have the funds to even record your song in a pro studio, and then they usually ripped you off, and you could not just release your music yourself unless you duplicated cassette tapes. But things have changed. It's much, much easier to release music now, especially because we have our sponsors DistroKid around. I'm going to point to them. Very, very easy to do. Let's just see how easy. If you want to release your music via DistroKid, there's just a couple of things you need. First of all, the music itself. Here's mine in my DAW Cakewalk, and I'm exporting it to an uncompressed WAV file for best results. Now, the other thing you'll need is some artwork. I just grabbed an old photo which I'd taken on the beach, chucked on some text here, and that's what I call art. Then I went over to DistroKid, and I just have to fill in this extra easy form. It's a no-brainer form. You get helped all the way through with little hints and things. You can't really do anything wrong. You just go ahead and confirm a few things about your music, and then you just have to actually upload the artwork and the song itself, and DistroKid takes care of the rest. It's going to send it out to all of the best platforms so that people can hear and buy your music. I love it when people send things in which are like when they are kind of new to this whole game. When people perhaps been doing it for a year or two and what have you. So this artist, as I said, not too much of a backstory, but I will tell you that this is one of those people. This artist is new to writing and recording. She's written around about 30 songs on paper in the first 2 years of doing this. So been in that very productive, not become jaded yet, obviously, phase of music. And then she's gone ahead and she's recorded 10 full songs in 10 months. And she sent me actually a couple of songs. And this one I thought was the best of the two in terms of songs. I just enjoyed it more. It's about anxiety and self-growth. Now, I've purposely not said the artist's name because, of course, I am leaving that to our good friend Marlon from White Noise Studio. There you go, Marlon.
Oh, dear. Marie Levesque with Push Back Up.
I reckon you're on the money there. I reckon that it's Levesque. It's a good, very, very good.
Yeah, it's French Canadian. I don't know.
Maybe sort of a Latin American name. Yeah, but could you say it again, just one more time for me?
Marie Levesque.
And the song title?
Push Back Up.
Okay. Because I thought the first time you kind of went push back up, and no, calm down.
No. Push.
I want to know why I fell down.
Back up. Push back up.
So again, look, I am going to preempt this and say I think that this is so much. This is so almost there. I listened to it a couple of times and I thought I like this song, but what is it that's making it not quite there? I couldn't put my finger on it, to be honest with you. So I'm going to let you guys put your fingers on it.
Shaking as soon as I realize I keep repeating to myself, just breathe. But do I find friendly? Do I care what people think? Or is it the fact that no one may be listening? I let it sink under my skin, always in doubt. What if I miss something enough to make it even when it's wrong? I need to change my thinking, let to be more convincing. I wanna walk beside myself. had enough of being ruled by anxiety. It always seems to get all the best of me, preventing me from so many things. It's like a weight upon my shoulders, pulling down. For the first time, I am ready to push back up. For the first time, I am ready to push back up.
Alrighty, there was a lot of conjecture in the chat there, especially about the vocals. People were focusing on the vocals. There seems to be a little bit of consensus in the chat there that people felt the vocals were a little too dry. I say, what say you, Marlon?
Well, I agree with that, but you can also argue that the rest has too much reverb, right? There's a unbalance in there's an unbalance in the balance between the vocals and the rest of the music. For me, this was a thin-sounding mix, where the last song was too glued together. This one is not glued at all.
Right.
It's really separated. It's really isolated.
Do you
What I
feel that
noticed
particularly
was-
with the? Do you feel that particularly with the vocal? Are you saying you felt like the vocals just like in a separate performance of the band? Or
No,
was that just
there are more issues with this mix than
Yep.
just the vocal. Vocal is one part of it. For instance, when the song started, the acoustic guitar or piezo guitar, I'm not sure which one it was, really was clashing with the vocal. It was even louder, I think, than the vocal. So that's one issue. And there's a lot of high end in this song, of the top high ends, like 10K and higher, which makes it very brittle and high. But in the meantime, you have no substance in the lower mid range. There's a lot missing over there. So that needs a lot of that needs to be worked on a lot. You can also hear that on the drums. By standard, you think, oh, drums need reverb. So there was reverb on the drums, which sounds very distant and thin. Then you have the vocals, which are very dry and somewhat buried in the mix. And the acoustic guitar, which is too loud. So it's an unbalance at this point in the mix. So yeah.
Where would you
It's
sort
difficult.
of start with that? I mean, what's going to be your approach if you were handed this mix at the moment? What's going to be your process?
I would
to fix
start
it?
with bringing up the vocal.
Yeah.
In this case, just make it sound full-bodied and vocal, and then mix in the rest, because the vocal is the main focus for this song. Instead of adding the vocal at the last bit of everything, and then you find out you don't have any room for the vocal to blend in. So I would start with that. And just leave up all reverb. Make sure you can get a balance without any reverb or actually any EQ, and then work from there.
It's interesting that you bring that up as a technique, because it's something I didn't used to do, and I suspect I want to focus on this at the moment, because I'm sure most people starting out, because you've got your kind of temporary mix while you're recording your song, okay, and you may put some effects on different things just to make it comfortable while you're tracking, so that you've got something nice to sing against. But I used to then just go on from there. But for several years now, what I've done is just turned off all plugins on every single track and get the balance right. I mean, just a little exception to that, of course, is don't turn amp sims off.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
But at least get a proper balance. Don't overdo it, but get a balance where you think, okay, this is something I can start working with and work from there, automate from there, EQ from there, add effects from there. But don't start with adding effects and then try to make a mix, because you're fighting against all these effects.
Yep. I agree entirely with that. It's an important thing, because I think a lot of people will not only miss that, but also effects are kind of the fun part of the process, and it's very tempting to just get on with using them because they're fun to play with, especially delays, reverbs, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. I do have to add, if an effect is an essential part of his sound, then of course you need to have it on.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, as I was saying, you need amp sims on, and probably in terms of arrangement, if you're sort of like the Edge from U2, then you probably do want that delay on your guitar because it's a part of the song, just as an example. So yeah, there you go, Dan. That's a lot, isn't it? That's a lot.
What's there left to say?
What is left to say? I know this is a problem that Ed and Marlon have with each other. Welcome to being stand-in Ed. But yeah, do you agree with Marlon on what he had to say there?
I do a lot. I mean, I think we all agree. I mean, everyone was focused on the vocal because I guess it's a lot of vocals and it's dry in contrast to some of the other elements in the song. I mean, I felt there was a lot of low end energy just missing. I mean, there's a lot of dynamics potentially in the song, and I love big sounds. I don't care the genre. I mean, but something like this can feel big, and it just there's lacking a lot of energy down low. But something that I can focus on, and maybe just to add to this conversation instead of repeating things that Marlon said, is I'll focus on the guitars. There's a lot of guitar in here, which I love. I think that's great, but I think there was a problem that was sort of corrected. Like from the beginning, there was sort of the rhythm guitar and then this lead were kind of sitting in the same area to me. That because I love wide sounding guitars. That kind of got corrected. I don't know. I don't know. It was just the way I heard it, but then I started feeling it more wider in the stereo spectrum. But you have that electric guitar, which was very loud in the mix, and then you had the acoustic guitar. And the way I treat guitars like that, sometimes I'll create two parts that are meant to work together to create a bigger sound, even though it could be an acoustic mixed with an electric,
right?
Just to broaden the sound. So it's one part that's created with two different guitars,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm creating two guitar parts that complement each other, where in fact, one might sit on the left. Think of in terms of a band. If you've got two guitar players, one might be here, one might be here, but they still need to complement each other. I found that electric guitar coming in sometimes was like, whoa, it's like so present and kind of brittle sounding. And then the acoustic guitar just sort of fell to the background, where if I was mixing that, I would probably favor one side for one guitar, one side for the other guitar, and watch the balance and let them work nicely together. And EQ is really the key at this point, because they don't want to occupy this exact same space, right? But create a little distance wider, make them a bit wider sounding, and work better together. But there's lots of guitar in there, which I think is great. Just have to be very careful on how you place them to ensure that they're really complementing each other, and decide if it's supposed to be one part or if it's supposed to be two different players. And that's really the mindset you have to kind of be in to figure out what to do.
Interesting. And you've given so much there. There is a lot to say about this song. I'm going to give a couple of other different perspectives. It was mentioned in the chat when the song was playing that a couple of people thought that the vocal may be a bit pitchy here and there. Now, I normally pick up on pitchiness really, really quickly. I'm very capable of singing pitchy, I can promise you that. But just when I'm listening, I'm normally I'd listened to the song a couple of times before, didn't pick up on it, but this time I did, just in a couple of small ways. If the artist is either here live or watching on the replay, I wouldn't get too hung up on it. It wasn't awfully pitchy, and I can tell you that let's pick someone. I've listened to a few Adele songs, for example, where she gets pretty pitchy at times, and it's still gone out and been an incredibly successful track. So I don't think it's that kind of pitchiness, but if you want to look at it, it may be worth looking at with a bit of melodyne, as was suggested. And I think one of the people that picked up on this was Kianra Music, and I know she's actually a vocal coach, so I'm going to trust her opinion there. So there was that in there. I'm going to get a little bit old-fashioned, and in fact, I know Ed Thorne is big on this, and I'm going to say what he probably would have said. And there's a little bit of diction I want to talk about there. Of course, there's music where there's styles of music where diction is not important because the lyrics are not overly important. There's some music, say for like REM, where you can clearly hear what he's singing, you just don't know what the heck he means. But in this case, there was an actual message to this song, which I could hear here and there. And I picked up on this on my first listen, and on my second listen, I was like, yeah, it's like when I'm listening to it, 4 out of 5 lines I can hear really, really clearly, and I'm like getting into the meaning of the lyrics. And then suddenly there's that there's the odd line here, and I go, what was that? What was that? I just think, Marie, if you're watching and you get a chance to address this, it may have something to do with the mix a little. So it may be that you were kind of pronouncing okay, and if you do, lift those vocals up a bit, it may be solved by that. But I'm a little bit, what's the word, pernickety about that. I'd like to hear what she's singing. I think she spent some time on the lyrics, and I'd like to hear them. I will say, overall, I like your vocal tone. It's got a nice character to your voice, which I enjoyed, and there was a note towards the end which was really high, and you nailed it. You totally, it was a good performance moment in the song, and often it's good to have that in a vocal. The only thing, and again, this is not really a mix thing, but I felt at times the song lacked sort of dynamics. I felt it got up to 90% after about 10 seconds, and it stayed at 90% for 90% of the song, and then right at the last minute there was some dynamics. There was a bit where it all dropped down, and I think there could be some parts in the song where you could just drop things out a bit. Just a very easy trick, if anyone's trying this. If you've got a very full band sound, so you've doubled your guitars, you've got your drums, you've got bass, you've got your vocals, maybe you've got some keys, and you come out of a chorus and everything's been on full. If you just drop it down to, say, drums and bass and vocal, maybe just a little guitar, it can really be magic for a song. It's just an old trick. People have been doing it forever and ever, but it can just make things feel very, very cool indeed. And then you've got somewhere to go for your next chorus. You've got a place to go to dynamically. So I felt that it was a good song, good performance. Nothing wrong in those terms, but it could just be slightly improved by those things. I hope that helps. It's just my matter of opinion, of course. Doesn't mean I'm correct, but yeah, if that inspires you, then great. Now, I think Marie has done really, really well for someone who's only been writing for a couple of years. She's recorded 10 songs, and I think she will be ready to release these songs once she sorts out some of these things. And when she does release those songs, I really hope that she'll use DistroKid, because she'll get 7% off, won't she?
Mm-hmm.
If you do follow the link in the description down below, it's going to take you to a special page on DistroKid with this yellow banner at the top. That banner is letting you know that you're going to get a further 7% discount off your first year if you sign up here. And let's face it, it's already very cheap. If we scroll down, we can see that a year's membership is $19.99 per year for an unlimited number of albums and songs. And so long as it's your own music, there are no extra charges, and you get to keep all of the royalties from the various platforms. Platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, TikTok, Pandora, Amazon, Instagram, Tidal, iHeartRadio, Deezer, and more. I love the fact that this show has been so full of guitars and drums and things like that. It's been a bit of a pleasure for Dan, I think, especially on my... Oh, pointing the wrong way. Over here. It's Dan the Lonely Rocker. He craves this sometimes, because once you get past around about the age of 50, you no longer enjoy new music at all. And Dan is stuck in the past there, and he's just been in heaven in the show, I feel. It's been nice to kind of patronise an old fella, really, and give him a little bit of what he wants. And so, yeah, Dan.
I've earned it.
But in all seriousness, I know that, of course, Marlon comes from a bit of a rock background as well, and he's shaking his head there. I've heard a fair amount of rock music from you. What's your background then, Marlon? Tell me about it.
Weird music. A lot of weird music.
Just weird music?
No, you're not totally off with the rock music, but when I was a little boy, I listened to a lot of death metal, but also drum and bass and Prodigy and stuff like that. So it's pretty broad. Okay. And my life got messed up when I discovered Frank Zappa when I was 15.
Well, it did for all of us.
So
I discovered Frank. I think I was about 15 when I discovered Frank, and wow, it was like, okay, quite amazing. Now, listen, we're going to be listening to a good old rock track to finish off with here. And I'm very pleased to say that I just spotted earlier that the artist for this track is actually in the chat here. So we're going to get together. Now, this person is actually quite a regular in the chat of recent weeks, especially. I did not know anything about his music. This came through. I didn't actually happen to notice the artist's name, and I thought, oh, this is going to be an interesting one to have on here. Although Dan may take a little bit of exception with it, because this, I'm going to read out from the artist here. This was originally intended, this song, as a demo for this person's band, The Zombie Economist. Okay, that's the name of the person in the chat. But realised I hadn't had enough actual bringing songs to completion, so decided to see how far I could take this one. So this was originally a band song, Dan, but now it has the likes of programmed drums on it, that being Easy Drummer 2. The Zombie Economist is saying the mix feels very close to me, but I feel there's something missing that I can't quite put my finger on. It's maybe that last 2%. I think I'm too close to hear it now. At some point I'm going to have to stop fiddling with it. Mrs. It's true though. Like, just before we do listen to the song, just as an old man talking, try not to put your whole career, if you like, or your whole experience into one song. Okay, like, do realize that you learn and progress over time. Okay, and maybe sometimes we've just reached the best possible point we can with our current abilities and experience for this song. And it's always good to move on once you get near that limit and start on a new piece of work. You can sometimes go back, of course, and try and improve songs, months or years later. But I'm more of an advocate of forget the past, move on past it. Put it out there, get it out there to the world, let people hear it, let them say good, let them say bad, but just move on, evolve past that moment. So, I will say I enjoyed this song as soon as I heard it. Yep, carry on, Mark.
That actually feels like releasing YouTube videos, doesn't it? Just get them out there and move on with the next one.
Let it go.
It's very, very true, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I'll tell you that when I started with YouTube, a little bit of a confession here, I'm just a bedroom producer, and I had about 15 songs of mine sat on my hard drive, which some of them had been there 10 years, right? And I was always I'll get to that and do the final mix, and I'll master it and then I'll release it. And I had released some, but to be honest with you, when I started on the YouTube channel and I needed to demonstrate things, and I wanted to make sure that music was out there and published before I used it to demonstrate things, I just went, I'll just release it all. That's it. And it was a great feeling of relief. And what I realized is that any writer's block that I had went away. I was free to create new material. I was just think mentally, I just let go of it. It's like my kids. It's like I kicked them out of the house and I said, you're on your own now. I've done my job. Go away, for God's sake. No.
I try to do that with my kids, but one is 6, so that's a bit...
7's okay, but 6 a little too young. Now listen, as I say, The Zombie Economist, the song is called Recovery. Let's have a listen to it now. He's there in the chat. Let's be kind.
Curtains wide and fix a vacant smile.
Well, it's all been about energy this week on the show, and I've got to say I've enjoyed it very, very much. Before we talk about the track, I just want to quickly say, if you want to send your mix in, if you're there in the chat now, if you're just like the zombie economist, if you've got an opinion or two, I now encourage you to send your music in and be brave, as the zombie has been. I think we know him well enough just to call him Zombie, don't we? That will be okay. And I will say, it is very brave when you've been in the chat all these weeks and, giving your opinion. Now you get to hear some opinion. And I'm going to, first of all, allow young Dan, the Lonely Rocker, to talk about this. This is a bit more up your street, although more grungy than you're into, but...
No, I can identify with this, and I've got some suggestions. I think that would really, if they're sort of wondering what's going on here, listening to it, I kind of feel like I'm leaning this way, because the guitars, great. I love big guitars, and the guitars are sort of leaning a bit on the left, and the vocals over there on the right. And I get it. I get that style of mixing where you're sort of placing them. But what I would do is I would take those guitars and I would go super wide with them. I want to hear them in both ears. Okay. And I don't know if he's done now. The way I would have treated that, we're past tracking. I know we're fixing the mix. So I don't know if there's, what I would do with that guitar part, I would have recorded it twice, even simply just changing the pickup on one of them and just go super wide, bleeding outside the edges of those speakers. And I would have brought the vocal more to the middle. That would have just made the song feel really big and wide. That's probably the biggest thing that would really change the whole feeling of this song and make it feel a lot bigger. From there, and certain things are kind of hard to judge, but that bottom end it's a struggle for most people working in home studios, and it's generally for the lack of ability to hear those frequencies properly because the room is not responding properly. And how I've learned to circumvent those issues working in a home studio is using a spectrum analyzer so you can see what the hell's going on down there, and mid-side EQing just to comb out all of the muddiness, because I mean the kick drum's got to be there, the bass guitar should be right beside it, so you've got a little separation between the two, and then you got to roll off those guitars so they're rolled off above those two. Right there will really clean up that bottom end and perhaps bring back some energy that's lacking. But the biggest thing that I think is wrong with this mix, those guitars, make them wide and bring those vocals more to the middle, and that I think will change the whole dynamic of the song.
Okay, good. I think it's some pretty good advice, and if it helps, I saw a lot of this head nodding from Marlon as you were speaking there as well, which is always a good sign. Marlon, I mean, I'm pretty sure you've got something to add, but do you agree with Dan on the whole there?
I fully agree with the guitars, right?
Yeah.
2 guitars, maybe even 4, but it's a bit much. But left, right, big guitars, maybe one guitar in the middle, just low in the mix to really make it a big wall of guitars to get a push. All recorded separately, so never duplicate, record separately to have those little differences to make it sound big and wide. Right. What Dan also pointed out, switching elements really helps with that to get just a tiny bit of a different sound, which helps in getting a bigger sound. What I noticed, I actually have a background as a drummer, so I was somewhat distracted by the drums on this track. First of all, I really start to hear easy drummer. I can really recognize those sounds now. First thing, I would try to tune down the snare drum a bit. I thought it was a bit high for the mix. If you tune it a bit more down, it will get more beef, which also helps with making the song sound bigger. If you get a pretty high snare, it will sound a bit wimpy. If you get a lower snare, it will sound bigger and fatter, get even more power. Never forget to try tuning on drums.
Yeah, right.
On the drums, I think they were a bit all over the place, to be honest. I was really checking the bass drum in comparison with the bass guitar, and they were not synced at all. The bass drum was like, let's make some nice drums, but I didn't think they were musical to call it like that. They were making accents,
the kick was not synced to the bass guitar. Is that what you're talking about? Or?
But they were not playing together, so you don't have to be in sync all the time. But drums were pretty free. If I would
they didn't
have a drummer
relationship
who did that
with each other. Yeah.
Exactly. If I would have a drummer in my studio which played like that, I would stop the session and work on the relationship between the drummer and the bass guitar to make it a tandem, to make it a unit. I would love to hear one version of this song with a really simple drum kit, like really straightforward 4/4, like doom, ka, doom, just to see what that does. Simple things like a drum fill. When you have a drum fill, as musicians, you expect to hear a crash with a bass drum after a fill.
Right.
You don't need to do it, but you expect that. It was not happening.
A formality.
Sometimes
Yep.
it's a formality. You don't have to do it every time, but it's something you expect from time to time. Single crashes without support of a bass drum is hard to pull off. Only Vinny Colaiuta can do it, but otherwise there must be something which supports that. There were all these little things in the drums throughout the track, which actually distracted me of the rest of the songs. I would really work on that. Simpler, make it very simple to start with. See how that works for the entire song, and maybe add in things which really support the rest of the track with accents, with bass drums, even snares and stuff like that. I think that will lift the song to another level.
Okay, interesting. Well, there's a lot to take. I hope that he's allowed us to call him Zombo. I hope Zombo can get something useful from that. I have some notes here, which one of these notes is in contradiction to something that Marlon said. I'll get onto that in a moment. But I liked the vocal production in this. It was very produced in a particular way, in that it was that sort of very middly, almost radio-like production. I thought that was fine. That was good. Could come up a little bit, I think. Sometimes for this style of music, which I think at times was bordering on sort of Nirvana kind of a style at times, was maybe that's not always important, but anyway, I thought it could come up a little bit. In general, I thought I've got notes here to say that I just felt it was lacking a little bit in the low mids. Now, just listening on these headphones at the moment, to a streamed song, so maybe I'm just indicating you might want to take a look at that rather than definitely, but I just felt it was lacking a little bit of body there. Not right at the low end, but as I say, the low mids, okay? There was some interesting things in the composition. I just want to mention that. There was a middle section where things got really, really messy, and I liked that. That reminded me more of Radiohead. Radiohead were masters of that. I went to a couple of Radiohead gigs, and you went, is this noise on purpose or by mistake? But it was on purpose. It's a fine line, okay? It's a fine line when you want to create a little bit of chaos in the middle of a track. But I think you pulled it off, Zombo, pretty well there. I like that part of it. It's not an easy thing to do. Again, I'm just going to talk about dynamics a little bit. I just felt could have been a little more. I know there was a couple of sections where things went a little bit different, a drop, but I just felt that for a lot of the song, again, dropped down. You could have dropped down to just the bass and drums for a moment, and it would have been magic, So where I contradict Marlon, and I'm coming from a slightly different perspective, is I actually liked the drums. I did put in there, I liked the drum programming, but I think what I'm saying there is that it almost sounded like a messy drummer to me, which was, I knew they were programmed drums, of course, and there was an element to it, like there was a bit of chaos in the drums. But I do agree with Marlon, thinking on it now, that it could have been more. There's a thing called a contrived mess, where it sounds like chaos, but actually it's been created. I don't mean chaos, but energy. You want it to sound like a band. It doesn't want to be too perfect, but making certain elements work together, like the drums and the bass, is always a core of virtually any kind of music that we broadly call rock and roll. It's just very, very important indeed. So those were my points on it. But overall, love the song. I loved all the songs that were on here today. Actually, I thought they all had as I've said on other shows, at least they're worth improving on. Some songs you may as well throw them away. All three of the songs, I reckon, are worth the effort that you're going to need to put into them to sort of get them over the line. What say you, Marlon? Any last sort of thoughts for us today?
In regards of mixing, learn when to stop. So when you've done mixing, that's even on a day-to-day basis. When you're mixing, there comes a time where you really need to stop and continue the next day or in a few days, because that will open your ears, will get a different perspective, and will actually improve your mix. You will get a little bit of distance. You'll be more objective. That's my thing.
There's something I alluded to maybe at the beginning of the show, and you often hear YouTubers talk, and people like us talk about the fact I'll take a break. But sometimes I think what we forget to say, or at least this is in my opinion, after that break, like, trust that very first listen of the song more than anything else. Like when I'm talking about if you manage to get a week away from the song or something like that, that very first listen, make lots of notes as quickly as you can, because that's when your ears will hear exactly what's wrong with it. And even once you get back into that second or third listen, you're already starting to lose your perspective, in my opinion, like really, really quickly, especially if it's something you've composed, performed, and mixed yourself. It's a hard thing to do. Now, there are people out there, purists, who say you should never do it. Don't do that. I don't agree with them. I've heard enough decent songs now performed, mixed, and even mastered by a single artist where I've really, really enjoyed the music. Sorry to be out there and be a bit radical with that, but I think that in the right hands it can be done. You may disagree with Marlon. What do you reckon? Not Marlon. Dan, what do you reckon on that? I mean, you mix. You're the musician, and I think you master your own music. Now, your opinion may be skewed, but going on other people's music you've heard, do you think people achieve this?
Well, one thing I want to say, and I don't know if this ties more into the compositional side, because we were just talking about Easy Drummer, and again, it depends what you do, right? Like me, I play bass and guitar. I play drums, but not good enough. So when I'm doing my own music, I'll program my drums. But you could sometimes lose perspective when you're doing it yourself, especially when you're performing your own tracks, right?
Not sometimes, pretty much always.
Probably I'm being nice, but all the time. But one thing I'll talk about in terms of, let's say, drums, because drums are very important to me. In fact, I probably listen to drums and bass more than guitar. Even as a guitar player, I take a lot of my inspiration from the rhythmical side of music. But talk about Easy Drummer, for example, and this is something that I hear a lot in the composition side of the mixes, is creating a drum pattern in Easy Drummer. If you're using the compositional tool built into Easy Drummer, it's very loop and grid based, right? Yep. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, crash on the 1, 2, 3, 4, crash on the 1, 2, 3, 4. Where if you listen to a real drummer, even if he's jamming in a straight 4/4, something like boom, pop, and he'll crash on the 2, not the 1, but he'll crash on the 2. So with Easy Drummer, once you've got your composition done, you can drop the whole thing down in whatever DAW you're using. You have access to the MIDI notes, right? You go in there and make little edits. Just to think about, like in visually, you have an edit or you have a dissolve. Think of the dynamic shift when you dissolve into the next scene. Sometimes it's not called for, and sometimes it is. But with drums, it sort of removes that rigidness from a programmed drum pattern. Where I did a whole video about this. It was based in Logic Pro, but the step once you get to the MIDI side, you can make little edits in the MIDI just to move those crashes and find where the good emphasis should be. Catch a bass note, maybe bass note on the 2 instead of on the 1, and humanize it a little bit. And then if you've got, and sometimes those fills that they throw at you, like you said, it becomes messy. Like what is that? Well, that's what the program gave me, but you can thin it out. You can, there's a lot of editing you can do, and that's really the foundation of that track too, especially something like this.
I've spent many, many years using virtual drums, and this track I'm working on with Ed at the moment, it's got real drums, but before that, many years since I worked with real drums, and I know that a lot of people will be in that boat, but I will say this. I've never ever used one of those grooves that comes with a virtual drum. I've never used that in any of my songs ever. I've always written all of the drum parts for the song. I think it's highly important. I've mentioned it before, and what you were talking about the fills there reminds me that, you know, a fill isn't just a thing by itself. It's there with other instruments. It may be that it's emphasizing something that the vocal does as it leads into the next part, or emphasizing something that the guitar is doing. I mean, sometimes, of course, they do exist in isolation, but that's what I'm saying is that, you know, the relation, when you use pre-programmed loops of drums, they don't have a relationship to this song. They're a generic thing, and it can sound very unsatisfying.
Like Marlon said, I mean, drummers, great drummers. I mean, Vinnie Colaiuta is certainly one of the greatest of all time. But some of the best drummers in the world were compositional drummers. They weren't just, you know, smacking a beat.
Exactly.
They were actually writing their drum parts. And when they would perform live, just like the verse and chorus, they were playing their drum parts as if it was a chord and it belonged to that part of the song. And that relationship, that raises a song up so much.
Mm-hmm.
I will actually add the name Lars Ulrich there. The most hated drummer, I think, in the world. But you can, when you hear his drum parts, you know what song it is. That is something which he does really good. He's really compositional. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
think it's really key. Yeah, carry on.
I was going to say, talk about drummers. I mean, Mike's going to chuckle when I say this, but Neil Peart from Rush, I think he influenced all those drummers, right? And he was probably the ultimate compositional drummer, because if you listen to his songs, he never played the same part the same, but it always fit. As busy as he was, it always fit the song.
Well, I must have said it about 6 times on different shows already, but, you know, I never used to respect him. I'm going to say this. But Ringo Starr, when it took me years to understand kind of how great Ringo Starr was. Mm-hmm. And very much the same thing. For 99% of the time, when you listen to his drumming, he's playing the song. He's not playing a drum pattern. He's playing the song. He's accenting certain things that the different musicians are doing. And came up with some remarkably unique drum parts in the process as well, which, with what you're both saying there, that there's some of them that you could definitely identify the song just from the drums. I love that. And, you know, as with anything, if we're going to have this conversation, I think this applies to virtual instruments. I mean, I know Pete Johns is in there at the moment from Studio Live today, and he brought up he's just said here, interesting topic for sure, what is real in 2022. You know, the fact is, whether we like it or not, a vast majority of the people in home studios are going to be using virtual instruments, and a lot of people have come to me and said, you know, why do you talk about virtual guitars on your channel when, you know, you're a guitarist? And to be honest on it, and I think I've probably made it clear, I don't use virtual guitars on my own recordings. I don't, but I review a lot of products and I've looked at a lot of virtual guitars. And that's because I recognize that, you know, people such as, I think Mimo Japan is there at the moment, are committed to using virtual guitars in their music. So I just want to at least educate them about how guitars work and what's important with guitars, and not just, you know, their different tones and their different styles of guitar, but how they work even within a piece of music. And it was interesting because I saw a conversation only today about this, and a guitarist obviously was sort of dissing the idea and saying, hey, just go away and learn to play guitar, you know? And I thought, interesting. So if you decide to have a little violin on your song, do you just go away and learn the violin, or do you grab a violin library? And if you want to, you know, whatever, we use loads of virtual instruments. We're not going to go and learn all these instruments. And to be quite honest with you, Mimo Japan's a good example. He doesn't even use a keyboard to input. He uses the mouse to input notes, right? And he does a pretty good damn job of making it sound, you know, like a cohesive, real piece of music. That's my opinion.
Well, it's because he tries, right? That's his. I mean,
right.
he's doing it because he has to, but he's not leaning on it. There's a difference. And, you know, I know you always razz on me. It's our theme about virtual instruments. I don't have problems with virtual instruments. The problem I have is people starting from the same starting point with a lot of the same loops and instruments, and just using them as opposed to, instead of it being a tool is a tool. A tool can shape things, right? But borrowing pieces and using them as is, that's not originality. That's just like, well, I don't play violin. Here's a loop. I'll just throw it in there.
I guess what my point was, sorry, I didn't quite kind of finish that. if you're going to use virtual instruments, educate yourself about those instruments. That is not just, I mean, educate. I'm not a drummer, okay, but I know something about the differences between different drum kits, you know, a Gretsch or what have you, that there's difference in sounds. Just through paying attention, I try to pay attention to what real drummers do, as you were saying earlier on, Dan, you know. And yeah, if you're going to start to use trumpets in your music, listen to trumpet players, listen to what they do. Don't just grab the virtual instrument and just start playing on the keyboard there and thinking, oh, well, it's sampled, it must sound like a trumpet. No. It's about performance. It's the performance element which actually makes it sound real. I see Marlon nodding his head a lot there. What have you got to add there, Marlon? Glad you agree.
Well, a lot of to make something sound realistic is in its performance and not per se its sound.
Yep.
So if you mimic a cello on a guitar, you have to make sure you play something which sounds a bit like a cello and not like a guitar, because otherwise it will sound like a cheesy cello instead of a real cello.
Exactly. That's what happens, you know, a lot of the time. And so, yeah, and it's worth keeping in mind if you're working on music with that perspective, that if you're finding, hey, look, I got this virtual instrument, and it sounded great. When I first tried it out of the box, it sounded like, you know, again, we'll go to trumpets. But now it's in the music, and now it suddenly sounds like a synthesizer. Look at the way you are using it. Are you really phrasing things the way a trumpet player would phrase? Are you using the range of that instrument, or the realistic range of that instrument? So, yeah, and on from that as well, just as a final point on that. Treat it as if it was recorded in your studio, and then EQ it and compress it, and if it hasn't already had that done to it, of course, you know. But yeah, any final words? I'm going to by the way, thank you so much to everyone who's been here in the live chat there. Don't forget to like the video for you. It's amazing that no one's really asked me about the huge thing that's coming up. But anyway, I'm going to leave the final word to put him on the spot. Marlon.
I have one final sentence, and that is, Mike,
I'm going to do it with Dan's picture up here, by the way. So Dan, if you could just...
Oh, that's fine. Yeah. Mike, what is that big thing you have coming up?
As the actress said to the bishop. Well, I just will clear up one thing before we go about this, because when I was talking about this in social media the last couple of days, or when I put up a couple of little videos and stills, people are anticipating it must be a big new cakewalk feature. So I will clear that up. It's got nothing to do with cakewalk whatsoever. Not only, by the way, there is a program you can join with Cakewalk where you can sort of get a beta or beta, however you pronounce it, version of Cakewalk. I think it's called the Insiders Program. I purposefully don't use the Insiders Program. I always want to experience Cakewalk as people are currently experiencing it with the current version. So anyway, I don't know anything about what's coming out in Cakewalk. I don't pay much attention to that. I just use it when it comes out because I'm just a Cakewalk user, just like you guys. But it's got nothing to do with Cakewalk. It's got everything to do with